Wanderers, the Season 11 PTR finished up last week. Unfortunately, I didn't get quite as much time on it. I got sick. I'm still recovering. You're probably hearing my voice. And I was working from Tuesday to Tuesday, which is when the PTR was running from. So I did get to play. And we're going to go over all of the changes that are going to be coming, everything that we got to test on the PTR, some of the community feedback, some of the really great things that are going to be coming in Season 11, and some of the stuff that we definitely need to see some changes before we hit the live servers. Now, everything that you saw is subject to change. It is pretty mixed on how people feel about it. But remember, we're going to be getting a whole slew of changes before the season actually goes live. So everything you saw may not actually make it into the season. So we're going to get that probably about a week before the season actually launches. That was the whole reason that they did the PTR so early. So the first thing we're going to talk about is going to be the itemization of the gear. Now, your itemization is changing a whole lot. Currently on the live servers, all your legendary gear is going to have 3 different affixes, and then you could put 2 tempers on. They're going to be removing 1 temper, and then they're going to be giving you 4 different affix lines on the gear. Now, originally, and we used to actually have this previously before the Season of the Loot Reborn happened, we had 4 affixes, but there were no tempers then. We just had your 4, and that was the way that it was. This is going to be a pretty big change because you won't be able to temper 2 different tempers at all. You get 1. That will end up changing when we get into some of the masterworking and the tempering section of it. Now, I posted a whole video on all of the masterworking and tempering changes that are coming because there's some big ones. The tempers, especially on your weapons, were going to be the most important ones. It was only 1 temper. It was never really 2. The second temper normally was just a little bit of additive damage. The first temper was the one that was really important. So something like for a Barbarian, chance to cast your Earthquakes twice, or Hammer of the Ancients deals double damage. Those are always the ones where your masterworking went into. Now, masterworking actually will only increase what is called quality. So if you look right here, this is what the new masterworking screen is going to look like. You are going to have your quality ranks here, and quality will only increase whatever the base affix of the piece of gear is. So for example, if you have a helmet or any piece of armor, that's going to increase the armor stat on it. If you have a weapon, it's going to increase the weapon DPS. If you have a ring or an amulet, it's going to increase the resistances to all elements. So that's what's going to happen. Once you hit your final rank of your masterworking, you're actually going to get an additional GA. So if you have a 3 GA piece of gear and you masterwork to quality 20, you will now have a 4 GA piece of gear. So what happens if you have a 4 GA piece of gear already? Well, if it is a legendary and you have put a temper on it, which now you, like we said, we can only put 1 temper on. That temper will now become a greater affix. So you're going to still get a lot of the power that we would have been losing by going from having your specific masterworking crits, which is what is in the live server, to having no masterworking crits. You can still kind of do that with your tempers. So they're going to be removing 1 temper. We're going to have your masterworking go to quality 20. It's going to increase the base affix of the item that you have, and it will add an additional masterworking greater affix to that item. If you don't get the one that you want, that's where re-rolling comes along. So those are going to be some of the really big changes. Now, a lot of people were very concerned about the added RNG that this would have. If it was already hard enough to find 2 stats that you needed on 1 piece of gear, now how are you supposed to find 3 stats and then re-roll your last one? Well, during the entire testing that I did, the itemization actually felt way better than it did in the current season. There were some affixes. Obviously, there are always going to be affixes in any ARPG that you do not need for your character, but it didn't really feel like this piece of gear is absolutely completely garbage. I'm going to just toss it. A lot of the gear that I found was usable in some form of capacity. So even though they added in that extra affix, it still didn't feel terrible. And during the leveling process, which is what we're going to get to in just a little while, it actually felt really good, but we'll talk about that soon. The next thing that we're going to touch on is going to be toughness. Now, toughness is going to be joining the season. It's going to be replacing all of your resistances cap and your armor cap. Currently, we have a 1000 armor cap and a 75 soft cap and an 85 hard cap for resistances. Really easy indicators. You know if you're tough enough, which is what we're going to be talking about. And then you also know if you're going to be taking enough elemental damage or if you're going to be dying. So it's a really good way for us to know, okay, I'm strong enough or I'm not strong enough. The only problem with that system was that having armor cap and having resistance cap actually wasn't enough. If you were to go into the pits and to push higher a little bit, and even inside of Torment 4 content, having just armor cap and resistance cap, you died still. Now, why? We didn't have enough damage reduction. How do you know how much damage reduction you needed? Well, we didn't know how much damage reduction we needed. We just knew that we needed a lot of damage reduction. So as we stacked more damage reduction, we felt better, but there was nothing telling you to do that. With the way that toughness is going to work, toughness is going to basically show your effective HP. If a monster is going to hit you for 1,000 and you have 1,000 life and you have 500 toughness, you're going to take 500 damage and you're going to be okay. Now, herein lies the problem with toughness and how it was introduced. How tough is tough enough to have enough toughness? That was what was missing on the PTR. Sure, you could grab toughness and you could say, okay, this is how much I have. Is that enough? We don't know. So we'll hopefully get to see some indicators, and that was some of the feedback that we have. Toughness, how tough is tough enough? Maybe a red, yellow, green indicator. Maybe something on one of the torment tiers that said suggested toughness should be this much per torment tier. I don't know. But something that a lot of people left out, because this is your toughness screen here, and I've seen people talk about this a lot. Everybody said that max life was gone and they removed it, but they did not. It's going to be right here. It's at the very bottom of your toughness window. They put max life in. I had 21 max life, super strong, super tanky. I felt great. The only problem was that this little pesky stat was still here, and you had to go into your toughness screen in order to see how much max life you had. Now, if they take max life and we move it out of your toughness and right into your attack power node, which if you have not seen any of the videos that I've posted over the last couple seasons talking about how bad attack power is and how you're building your character wrong if you're looking at attack power, go watch the videos, because attack power is the biggest scam for a stat in the game. It does not capture everything. It does not indicate how strong you are. So please go watch the videos. This would be an absolutely great place to put the max life stat. You have max life and you have toughness. Great, we're done. We can move on, and the UI would look amazing. So max life was not removed. It is still there and is still a stat that you can see. Leveling, I did get to tackle leveling from level 1 straight through level 60. We went to Torment 4, and I didn't take any of the boosts. If I had taken the boost first, I would have had things like Paragon points that I could have used. I would have had materials at my disposal. So I went from level 1, and we recorded all of the things that happened. My very first rare, which is the yellow pieces of gear, I got at level 8, which really isn't bad. And then I got my first legendary at level 17. My first rune dropped at level 16. I took on the first Capstone dungeon at level 26, and I finished it at level 30, which means I get 4 levels inside the Capstone dungeon. Now, they do feel a little tough if you go in under-leveled. And the way the Capstone dungeons work, which I'm actually very excited that they're in the game again, they are a very fixed dungeon. No matter what level you are, the first one will be level 30 monsters. So if you go back in at level 50, which you can do, because you're not going to take any penalty other than just not having a skill point, you will be able to be way out-level these monsters and just fly through it. On the flip side of things, if you go in under-leveled, it is very challenging. It is very fun, though. They introduced some new mechanics. That was also one of the pain points that people talked about a little bit, was that you are forced to have to go in and do some of these things in order to get the skill points that you needed. So they're changing Renown a lot. Renown is now going to be integrated into your seasonal ranks, is what it's called now. As you level up, you're going to gain your skill points back that you normally would have gotten at level 1. Now, it did not feel like it was really far-fetched and far outside of what you would have been doing normally. And the Capstone Dungeons is a nice way to test your build, so it is kind of fun to go do it. The only time that Capstone Dungeons are mandatory is if you would like to unlock the pits. This level 51 that you hop into, you cannot enter the pits until you have completed that dungeon. So once you go and hit level 60, you go back, you complete your Capstone dungeon, you now have access to the pits. None of the other ones will keep you from doing anything in the game. They're just going to give you either Paragon points or they're going to give you skill points. So that was something that people didn't want to have to do. They didn't want to be forced to do anything. It's just going to be the one in order to unlock the pits. So with seasonal ranks coming in, we'll see how it feels when we actually get into the live server and play. The problem I found is that I forgot to go do a bunch of the seasonal rank content because I was just caught up in leveling and I just wanted to get to the final stages, get myself there. And then I realized that I was level 60, I was in Torment 4, I was running around and I had forgotten to go get some skill points because I didn't really want to stop the grind that I was going through. So we'll see how much change comes to this and see if it's integrated a little bit more into your leveling process and the things you have to do. But that was something that I ran into while we were going. Leveling overall with the new gear felt really good because can you imagine having your character running around with an additional affix now? Tempering is very specific. You pick the temper that you want. Tempering is very cheap. So early on, you will now have 4 affixes. And when you go to the blacksmith, as soon as you start getting tempering materials, you can pick the temper that you want. Imagine having cooldown on all of your ultimate skills immediately as soon as you get the ability to temper, and you can pick it and you don't have to hope that you get it. You do it one time and then you move on. And now you have 5 affixes almost through the entire leveling process, which made leveling much faster. Now there was a whole bunch of these things here called like XP globes here, where they are part of the new divine gifts that we're going to have. The divine gifts you're going to get from doing the lesser evil content, and it makes it so that when you're fighting maggots, and as you can see, there's a ton of them here, they drop these experience globes. Now, I was specifically standing inside of the circle without moving, so you could see how many globes are spawning. This will probably get changed. But there were so many globes, and even if it does get changed and the XP gets reduced, leveling was faster, hands down, than it's ever been in any season. This made it faster, and no matter what, any little boost beyond what we normally had is going to make it much faster. So the leveling process, even though it did feel or look on paper like it was going to slow down, it actually did not. So for anybody that was worried about their leveling taking much longer because they took away the skill points, it did not. The very first stages of the game where you had to go out and you had to level up your character, and then you had to start getting your skill points and get your build online, that one felt kind of progressive. You felt like you were actually starting off the game again. Then your builds actually ramp up really quickly and leveling gets insanely fast. So we talked about the capstones a little bit. We talked about seasonal ranks. So hopefully we'll see a little bit of adjustment to some of that, but the leveling process itself felt really good. So I don't really think that we need to see much change coming out of leveling. If anything, it's better than any other season that it's been at. So the seasonal theme was the new lesser evils. That should be the main seasonal theme. The way that this was introduced, I don't think that that really came across. But you're going to be interacting with the seasonal characters in different ways. So you're going to be interacting with Belial, Asmodan. You're going to be interacting with Andariel, and you're going to be interacting with Duriel. Now, that's why there were maggots in Helltides in that video that you just saw. Duriel is going to be taking over Helltides. And in my last video, we talked about the Blood Maiden needing a vacation, so she let Duriel take over. She's on the beach with some Mai Tais. Duriel will now spawn from your baneful hearts that are going to be inside of Helltide, so you just go right up to the pedestals, and then Duriel pops out. It's a fun fight. We'll see. Duriel does disappear if you don't kill him fast enough, but it really didn't feel terrible. And the new theme and how Helltide looked and all of the new monsters in it was very cool to see. I did like what they did with Helltides. In the Undercity, I didn't notice a ton of difference when we were fighting Andariel, but there is some fun mechanics in there. It's fun to see different perspective on it, and I didn't really get to do too much of the Undercity, but Andariel will be there. Asmodan is a boss that is summoned, and we do have some feedback here on it. The world bosses and Asmodan itself were giving an insane amount of experience. Now, that's probably going to change as well. You were getting like 20 plus levels during your leveling process, which clearly was not working as intended. So that's going to be changing when we get their final patch notes. I'm sure we will not go into the server with that. So anybody that's expecting to see that, just know that that's going to be pulled back a little bit. But then we had to look at the pits here. So inside the pits, that's where Belial is going to be taking over. It was cool to see all the new monsters there. You get to fight Belial at the end. The boss fight is, I'm not sure yet. We'll see if they make any changes to the way the boss fight handles. The pain point for the new season mechanic moving into the pits was they have eyes throughout the dungeon. And as you're running the pits, you have to go click on these eyes. When you complete 5 of the eyes, which there's more of them, you will now spawn Belial as the boss. It's a great way to get your seasonal reputation. It's a great way to get your new material that you need in order to do your crafting. However, you have to physically click on the eyes. And I play on controller a lot just because I have a bad wrist and it just works really well for me. And having to try and click on it without having to click on the monsters and having the monsters be gone was very, very difficult. So it would be super nice if you just ran right over it, the eye spawned, and then you just started fighting that way. Something like that mechanic would be super nice to see, because for me on the controller, and I'm sure it probably would have been even harder on the mouse and keyboard to actually select that and get it to spawn, or you had to kill all the monsters, stand there, and then proc the eye, and then wait for the monsters to spawn. So I don't know, we'll see if they make any changes coming out of that there. Sanctification is going to be the other seasonal mechanic that's going to be added in. Now, this is the final step to your crafting. Now, this is the Sanctification screen here. This is going to make your gear unmodifiable, which means that you cannot change your aspects. You can't change anything about it. No tempering, no masterworking. You can't even add a socket if you don't have a socket already added to it. In return for making your gear unmodifiable, you have the chance to apply a legendary bonus. You can improve an affix to a greater affix. You can add an additional affix from a special pool of Sanctification affixes, which are actually really, really good. Now, all 3 of those are going to be your best options, and we'll talk about the other 2 in a second. Just imagine having 2 legendary bonuses on 1 piece of gear. You can have the additional affix, and there were some really cool ones. Double your strength value of your gems. You can add in strength percentage, or you can add in a multiplier for damage. There's some really great options inside of those Sanctification affixes. And best case and worst case scenario, if you get something that's going to improve your affix, it's still an improvement. Even if it's not the affix that you want, maybe it's not the extra legendary bonus that you want, you still have taken a piece of gear and you made it better. Now, there is the option here to replace an existing affix with your Sanctification affix. This is the one that everybody is very unhappy about, because this could take something like, let's say, Harlequin's Crest, and it could replace the cooldown reduction with another affix. Now, this is something that is designed to be done when you are completely done with your piece of gear. This is the final gamble on making a piece of gear better. You can also make your gear indestructible, which is basically just something that does nothing to your gear. Now, there is definitely a whole bunch of options that they could do with this, and I expect to see some changes coming to Sanctification. I personally don't mind the option of risk versus reward. Some of the affixes felt like they were very, very rewarding. Getting some of the legendary bonuses, sometimes I was just like, okay, it's just another power on there that I'm not really going to be using. So we'll have to see what they come with in the new season, but I do think that this is a really great option. It is very fun. It's only going to be here for 1 season, and maybe it'll come back in another form later on if it is a success when they make some changes to it. But the base of the idea is a great one. Hopefully we'll see some adjustments to how this is done. Even the indestructible, it is just basically useless because of the amount of gold that we get, but maybe just adding in something that will be like, oh cool, that's fun. It doesn't really do much for me, but that was a risk that I took with this piece of gear. When you do this, you're not going to go in with your best piece of gear and your only piece of gear, and you're not going to go in there and sanctify that. That is going to be the final when you have a replacement, and it has an option to make your replacement better. but do not go into this mechanic with your best piece of gear, and then it's the only piece of gear that you have, and then you go in and you have that chance for replacing an affix. We'll see what happens. There is going to be a lot of change to this. A lot of feedback has been given about Sanctification, but the percentage that you actually bricked a piece of gear was very, very small. A lot of people were calling adding an extra affix to your greater affixes bricking gear, and that is not the case. A brick means that it is completely unusable. If you needed the cooldown reduction from Harlequin's Crest and you replaced that, that is a bricking an item. But if you needed the cooldown reduction from Harlequin's Crest and you only had 1 GA and now you have 2 GAs, you have not bricked your item. You have just made it better. It wasn't the ultimate outcome of that piece of gear where you, let's say, got strength percentage on it or something like that, but that is definitely not what a brick is. That is just taking a piece of gear that you made better and that you took a risk on and that we may not have paid off in the way that you wanted, but it is not bricked. So make sure that when you're watching videos of people saying that everything is bricked, that because you didn't get one specific thing on your piece of gear, that's not how that works. As long as it is still usable, the gear is not bricked. So Sanctification is definitely going to be changed. There will be a lot of updates and a lot of changes coming to it. I think it's a great function. I think it just needs a lot of tweaking in order to make it to the live season and feel really cohesive with how we're doing things and how the game is going to be running. Now, a couple things that I wanted to touch up on was the seasonal order. People had a lot of feelings about this season, whether it is good or bad, but there really didn't seem to be anything in the middle. There are a lot of people that are automatically saying that they are not playing season 11. They have not even seen the final patch notes yet. They said that they're out. There are a lot of people that are super excited to get into this and experience some new change. I think that just things were done out of order. There's no changing this. This is just final thoughts that we're going to be kind of hopping into. If season 11 was season 10, we would see some changes coming out of season 9 going into season 10 with all of the new itemization changes, the seasonal ranks, the seasonal theme, all of that stuff, Sanctification, but it wouldn't have been received in the way that it was coming out of the current season 10. Season 10 was introduced a massive power boost to everything, every class, every build, all of it was huge with the addition of the Chaos Armor. Chaos Armor has been amazing. I personally don't really mind if things come that are really fun and then they go away and then we get some new stuff. That's just my personal thoughts on it. I do know a lot of people really want Chaos Armor to stay. There was some hints that maybe it'll be coming back in some sort of way or some sort of function. We'll have to see. But if season 11 was going to be the season of chaos, season 10, which would be the season 11 right now, would not have been received so poorly, I don't think. I think people would have seen a little bit of a power change coming backwards from season 9 to season 10, but it wouldn't have been so dramatic coming from out of a season of chaos where everything is crazy. So I think that was really just a kind of a mishap on how we got our stuff in. Because imagine getting your brand new characters with your guaranteed tempers, you get your Sanctification in, and you get your Chaos Armor. If we had seen it in that order, I think that this would have been a much different approach and a much different feeling going in from season to season here. So those are just my thoughts on how the seasons were introduced, and I don't think that there will be a ton of different feeling going from season 9 to season 11. We just had this crazy season of season 10 in the middle there wedged in. Some of the feedback that we're going to be submitting to the developers, and we'll just run down the list really quickly, is that when you portal to the Heavenly Forge, the only way that you can go back is right back to Kyovashad. All of your portals were lost, so hopefully that changes. The pets, hopefully they will be able to pick up your full gems, because there were a lot of gems that were dropping. I don't know if that's going to stay, but your full gems, and that included royal gems, were dropping on the ground. It was kind of fun to actually have the gems drop again, and not just like everything was a gem, but you still had your gem fragments dropping, but it felt basically like we're playing Diablo 2 again. You get your gems dropped, you socket them in as you're going. Normally during the leveling process, I don't even remember that I have gems because I don't have any in my bags. But during the leveling process, I dropped a gem and I put the gem in because I had it in my inventory. So I did like that feeling. Capstone caches were dropping ancestral gear. I'm assuming that's probably going to be changing. You can't see the world map from inside of a Capstone dungeon, so the only thing you could do was just teleport out. You couldn't go anywhere specific. The demonic shades might have been a little bit overtuned. I was in a Capstone dungeon. I had some pretty decent gear. Nothing else inside of the entire dungeon was killing me except for this little tiny shade that followed me around, and the dot damage that it did to me absolutely melted my life. I could not stay alive. I spammed all 4 of my potions and I just died. So everything else was fine, including the bosses, except for those demonic shades, so I think they're a little bit strong. We talked about Azmodan and world bosses XP. Capstones can be opened and completed on a difficulty that doesn't count toward progression. So hopefully we'll see some changes to that. Now they do list what difficulty setting you need to be on for the Capstone dungeon, but if you're just running through and you come to the Capstone dungeon and you hop into it and you complete it, but it's on the wrong difficulty setting and not that specific one, it does not count as you completing it. So I actually had to go back and complete the Capstone dungeon again, and there was no warning and no indication. So for just for a second, I was a little confused as to why it wasn't counting towards my progress. That was the reason. For how long some of these Capstone dungeons are, now the new mechanics in them were actually very fun, so it wasn't like it felt like a slog, but they were a lot longer than your normal dungeons. The rewards should be beefed up. I want a loot explosion at the end of these Capstone dungeons, so we'll see what happens coming out of the season. Then there was a skill point that was specifically tied to the Azmodan boss. That makes it very difficult and very challenging to get to that one boss. So hopefully it just gets changed to regular world bosses. I know they want everybody to experience the brand new boss because it was really cool. Azmodan was great. The mechanics were fun. The boss looks good, but having that specific one was definitely a challenge. Can masterwork with no tempers. Now I don't know if this is done on purpose, but you can actually masterwork your gear and then you could temper it. Either way, it's not like it really matters all too much, but if you don't want your GA to fall in your temper, then maybe this is a really good change and this was intentional. That's just going to be something that we'll just get verification on just to make sure that that is working as intended. Toughness, we talked about toughness quite a bit. The Belial Echo can cast a Belial after death animation. So there's this big gigantic shade of Belial that comes out and then shoots this gigantic AoE around the room, and it can actually spawn and continue to attack after Belial dies. So the whole death animation is really, really long. So hopefully, which they've made these changes to the pits in the past where nothing could kill you after death. Hopefully that just adjusts that and that it automatically goes away as soon as Belial itself dies. This one, I believe, was just some feedback for the PTR. We'll see, but we'll submit it anyway just to make sure that it doesn't make it to the live servers. But if you completed your seasonal ranks on softcore, you could not do it on hardcore. It was locked out for you. You can't enchant attack speed on a one-handed weapon, but you can get it on a two-handed weapon. So I'm not sure if the affixes were supposed to be there, but having those additional and brand new affixes like attack speed on a two-handed weapon make hitting your attack speed goals really nice. And having attack speed over something like critical strike damage is absolutely huge. Critical strike damage is not going to really do a lot for you, but attack speed, that's a big one. So the new affixes with the 4 affix gear is actually really great. So some of those new ones they added in were good. Mythics were being salvaged at 4 sparks. Definitely a mistake, but we're going to make sure that that gets submitted. If you had one piece of mythic, you then had unlimited sparks and you could just continuously gamble and you got more and more and more. 1 mythic turned into 2, 2 turned into 4, 4 turned into 8. It was pretty insane, so I'm assuming that's going to change. And then some of the feedback we talked about for Sanctification, that will be submitted as well. The wins here definitely were going to be the heavenly gifts in Helltides. Super noticeable and made the leveling process really great. Helltides itself was really, really cool to see. The Capstone maps, that was a lot of fun. This could open up a whole bunch of really fun stuff that I'm super excited about. We can do some races to Capstone completions, and leveling was definitely a win. It felt really good. It felt really smooth with the new affixes on the gear. You felt very strong during almost the entire leveling process, so I really like that. Sanctification was definitely a new win. I really like the idea of a risk versus reward in a game like this because the only thing we do is gear. Like, there's not anything outside of just looking for more gear. That's what all ARPGs are. You get gear to get your character stronger so that you can do everything and basically become a god and smash it. So if there's no risk, then you find the one piece of gear and you're done. I like having those risks in there. Now, a lot of people probably would put the tempering changes in here because now you can pick the temper. I personally really liked the old system. I know that it could have been frustrating to constantly roll the same affix over and over and over again, and you find a really good piece of gear and you brick it, and it's the only one that you found all season long. But I do like having those things in the game. It's just fun for me personally. Now, it's going to be changing, so we don't have to really worry about that too much. And then masterworking, we're going to be losing all of the increases to our stats, so it's going to feel like a power change. We'll see how we feel when we get into the live servers and everybody actually gets to play a character from level 1 straight up into Torment 4. People start pushing the tower. We'll get to see that there too. I didn't unfortunately get a lot of time in the tower, so I don't have a lot of feedback yet on this, but there was a ton of feedback given on the tower, so don't worry, they're going to make some changes to that as well. Now, we talked about all of the community changes as well here. This is some of the feedback that we got during the live streams, was just being forced to do some seasonal ranks for skill points, too much RNG with the new itemization, bricking your items through Sanctification, your power loss coming out of Season 10. I mean, no matter what we do, losing Chaos Armor, we're going to have a power loss, and it's going to be there. This one right here is the biggest loss from your Season 10, was just the build diversity. Season 10, you put a build, anything together, and it's going to get into Torment 4. It was very fun to do, so we'll see what adjustments we get to see coming out of it, but that was definitely something that a lot of people were concerned about. For the Barbarian specifically, Ground Stomp, great changes to Ground Stomp. Ground Stomp will now pull monsters in, so you don't actually have to rely on Wrath of Berserker. Unfortunately, Ground Stomp also makes enemies vulnerable, but the pull doesn't make enemies vulnerable, so we'll submit that as some feedback. Hopefully, we can get the pull, because it's clearly hitting monsters. That pull will now pull people in, and it will make the monsters vulnerable. Lunging Strike looks like it's still going to be the #1 build, even with the changes to the brawling. Now, Leap is going to be insane, and I'm super excited to get in and play Leap, so don't worry, Leap is going to be pretty crazy. Now, the new pants have a tiny delay, and I was worried about that just reading it before we even got into the PTR, and I talked about this a lot on the stream. I was worried that as soon as the ability went disabled and then re-enabled, there was going to be a very slight delay from the disabled to the re-enabled, and there is. And that happened when we were using Leap. It was avoided if you took the 4-second cooldown and you didn't hit a monster, because then it would automatically take that 0.5 second cooldown that was added in with the delay, and it took it away because it was a 4-second cooldown from the Leap talent. Now, when you leaped again and you hit a monster, then you didn't get that cooldown reduction, and then you would have a very, very small delay. You could avoid that by using Giant Strides, but in order to maximize a Leap build, then you want to avoid using Giant Strides so that you can add in some more damage multipliers. So we'll see. Hopefully that delay gets removed. That would be amazing, but who knows? Expertise changes were good, but it's more than likely going to end up, we're still going to have the same expertise used for almost every single build as it is, and it looks like it's probably going to end up being something like two-handed maces. And that expertise is just going to change from your two-handed axe to probably two-handed maces, just with the way that it's going to be working. They are going to allow you to get your rank 10 bonus for whatever you choose. Right now, you only got the bonus that was just there all the time. You never got that rank 10. Now, leveling up all of your expertise will now give you that rank 10 bonus when you equip the expertise. The coda changes were really, really nice. Call of the Ancients got some increased duration. That's going to put it on par with Wrath of Berserker, and with the Ground Stomp changes, that will have some pull. Call of the Ancients will probably be back on the menu for a lot of builds. We are now seeing Wrath of Berserker dominating because it has a pull. You don't have to use the Cry Rune. This could change. Leap felt amazing. Don't change it. Enough said. Coda, lots of changes are probably going to be coming. We'll have to see how brutal we get, but Hoda currently is uncapped for damage. And then scaling that with the Melted Heart of Selig, Hoda in the current season scale with your maximum resources. It gives you additional critical strike chance and critical strike damage bonus. If we have something like Melted Heart of Selig, where you can get 30,000-40,000 Fury, and now you're scaling your critical strike damage off of that much. We're going to see a cap put on it. The rest of the game has a cap of 500, except for the Barbarians with Hammer of the Ancients, and unfortunately with Ramalodni's as well. Ramalodni's does not have a cap at 500, so I'm expecting to see a cap on both of those abilities no matter what. It would be really fun if they don't cap it, so if you want to just let us run through a season without it being capped, just one, and then we can have Hoda just be on the menu and play it, that would be amazing to see. So there's going to be a lot of changes that are going to be coming. I do really like a lot of the stuff that was done. There is a lot of stuff that does need to change going into the new season, so I really do expect to see some changes, some pretty big ones too. And remember, everything that you saw is not final. We will be seeing the patch notes normally about 5 days before the season started. Hopefully they do what they did last season and give it to us a couple extra days early. If that's the normal, then we should be seeing it about a week before the season goes live, which should be, fingers crossed, December 9th. Now that is not guaranteed, but that is when the reliquary is ending. This is a big one. I don't know if with all of this changes, if it's going to get pushed back, but as of right now, the reliquary says that it is December 9th. With the talk of the new season, the last thing I'm going to leave you with is make sure you join Discord. The link will be at the top of the description of this video. We had 37 groups go out last season at the start of season 10. Now imagine having this brand new season. You've been playing solo for a long time. You finally get a group. You all get to go out there, explore all of the new gear, explore all of the new lesser evils coming in. You can trade and share all of the new gear that you're finding. It's a really, really great way. You join the Discord. When we start the registration for the new groups, you're going to get randomly placed with a group of 4. You don't even have to do anything other than just sign up. You go out together and then you have fun. Now, the Discord itself is booming. We have people in voice chat every single day. We have a very, very, very busy trade channel where you can hop in. People are trading gear constantly. It's very, very user-friendly, new player-friendly. We have a lot here for you. So make sure you take advantage of this. Hop into Discord, join the Legion. That's all I got for you today. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, make sure you share it with your friends. Catch you on the clip side. I'm live every night. I'd love it if you stopped by, said hi, theory crafted with me. Catch you on the clip side.